you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for. Chris Beard, the head coach formerly of the University of Texas, was fired in January after being arrested in December on criminal domestic assault charges. Okay, felony domestic assault charges. Well, on Wednesday, those charges were officially dropped by the alleged victim, Chris Beard's fiance. And as soon as those charges were dropped, the question becomes very straightforward. Will Chris Beard ever coach college basketball again? And so I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll give you exactly what I think, and then we'll kind of get into the details and the context behind everything. But I'll tell you this. When Chris Beard was arrested, when Chris Beard was fired, I said I thought he would never coach college basketball again. Well, here we are 2 months later, and I think that's something. Whether you agree or disagree, it's not really what matters in my opinion. But I do believe that Chris Beard probably will coach college basketball again. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about it. And obviously a quick disclaimer. The next 6, 7, 8 minutes, whatever this ends up being, we're going to talk about some very serious things. Very serious things. So be cognizant of who is listening with you. I don't know if you're in the car with family or friends, but keep that in mind because let's be blunt. There's going to be some serious topics to discuss going forward. Keep that in mind. But details that you need to know, and we don't have to get into all of them, but I want to make sure, you guys and girls have context. But as I said, Chris Beard, very successful college basketball coach. Some saw him as one of the probably 3 or 4 best coaches in college basketball. On December 12th, we all woke up to a police report that he had been arrested, and as I just said, charged with felony domestic assault. We all remember where we were and what we saw when we saw him walking out of a courthouse in handcuffs, in a jumpsuit, with a mask on. We all realized this was really bad. He was put on administrative leave, and he was ultimately fired in early January. And like I said, when this all happened, I said point blank, end of story, I don't think this guy ever coaches college basketball again. So the question becomes, why did I feel that way? Well, it was really 2 reasons. The first one, all you had to do was go read the police report, okay? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a criminal defense expert. But what I said at the time was this. Even if this young woman, the accuser, eventually drops charges, which unfortunately in a lot of cases like this, that often happens. But even if she drops the charges, the police report has a lot of very gruesome details on what happened. And I didn't think Chris Beard would ever be able to shake those details. One, as I said at the time, both sides in the police report agree there was an incident. Now, Chris Beard has a different version than his fiance, but at the end of the day, if they both agree there's an incident, it's hard to shake that. Chris Beard can't claim he wasn't there, can't claim he didn't see anything, can't claim he didn't do anything. They both agree that something did happen. But then more importantly, and I thought this was a proverbial, and I'm not being literal, but a proverbial smoking gun. There were marks on this woman. There were bite marks. There were scratches. There were cuts on her face. And I just said at the time, that is going to be something, again, that I think sticks with Chris Beard forever. Obviously, the police report alleged that he choked her, that he threw her on the floor. Again, very serious issues. But as I said, Chris Beard can't, whether Chris Beard claims this or whether his fiance claims this or whether the charges are dropped, the bottom line is those 2 things really stood out to me. One, they both agree that some sort of incident happened. And 2, at the end of the day, she had in the police report, according to the police report, marks on her that kind of indicated that some kind of domestic incident happened. And so at the time, I said, point blank, end of story, I don't think this guy will ever coach again for 2 simple reasons. One, it's going to be very hard for any athletic director to sell to his school president, to a board of trustees, to prominent alums, to boosters, to everyone in the community that Chris Beard should be the face of a major university, okay? That Chris Beard should be the face of a major university, not after this incident. 2, I thought, and to a degree still think, it's going to be really hard for him to recruit as the face of a university because he's going to have to go into homes of young men and he's going to have to look every mom in the eye and dad too, but mostly mom in the eye and explain what happened, what really happened, and why they should trust him with their son. So at the time in December and in January, I said he's never going to coach again because I don't believe that a school will allow him to be the face of the university after what he was alleged. But then 2, I think even if they wanted to, it's going to be so hard to sell in recruiting. How do you go into a home? How do you tell mom, I'm going to turn your son from a boy to a man? You know what mom's going to say? Mom's say, you better not. He better not turn out like you. I'm not sending him to you. And so at the time, that was how I really felt. But I will say this, as time has gone on, things have changed. I've already heard from multiple fans, multiple fan bases, people in the athletic space. Now, I'll say this. I don't think most ADs like him. I don't think most ADs like the idea of hiring him. And I will tell you, the people in the coaching community, I don't believe have very much respect for this guy. I've talked to 2 or 3 guys that are just like, it makes me sick. I have daughters. I have a wife. I have a mother, whatever. I have granddaughters in some cases. The fact that this guy is going to get an opportunity makes my skin crawl. But as I always say on this show, there's a difference between what could happen, what should happen, and what will happen. On top of that, there's a difference between what I would do and what somebody else would do. And as time has gone on, I do feel like Chris Beard is going to coach again. Now, listen, personally, if it was me, I probably wouldn't hire him. And I'm not here to sit here on my high horse and say I'm perfect and I've never made a mistake and I can do no wrong. But I do think there's a difference between I've made mistakes and this guy, according, again, to a police report, it's not my opinion, I didn't read it on a message board. This guy put his hands on a woman to the degree that it left marks on her. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Torres, you've defended other people. You said that you believe that other people are allowed to work. And I do believe it. Like, listen, Chris Beard's allowed to have a job. I just wouldn't personally hire him. And I think it's important at this moment in time to differentiate between Chris Beard and some other prominent college coaches. Because whenever I bring this up, people are going to say, well, Torres, you're defending Rick Pitino and you're saying Rick Pitino should be hired by St. John's. And what I would say is this, Rick Pitino, what we know, what Rick Pitino himself is guilty of, he had an extramarital affair in a restaurant, mind you, but an extramarital affair. That is not a criminal offense. Now, some of the recruiting stuff, I'm not saying I encourage it. And I'm not saying that in my heart of heart, I don't believe that Rick Pitino really did not know what's going on. But according to the facts that we have, Rick Pitino wasn't involved in that recruiting stuff. And the personal stuff is personal stuff. I might not like it. I might not want, my daughter, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her to marry him or marry someone like him. But there's a difference between what Rick Pitino did and what is in the police report that Chris Beard is alleged to have done, even if the charges are dropped. Same with Bobby Petrino. There's a big difference between screwing up your personal life and criminal charges that are ultimately dropped. Same with Hugh Freeze. I could go on and on. But there is a big difference between that and what Chris Beard was accused of, what was in the police report surrounding this Chris Beard stuff. And so if it was just personally me, I probably wouldn't hire him. And I do think there's going to be a lot of ADs that say, I can't, not this one. You guys and girls, you're going to have to go in another direction. But as I always say, in any incident like this, when it involves a prominent coach, it only takes one AD. And this guy has won a lot. And I think that's something that we do kind of have to separate whether we want to or not. On the court, he's a heck of a coach, right? It's kind of staggering. 8 years as a college head coach. NCAA tournament was canceled in 2020. But this was year number 8 for him. In the previous 7, 5 NCAA tournaments, It would have been 6, but 2020 COVID was canceled. Won an NCAA tournament game at Little Rock. Took Texas Tech to 2 Elite Eights and a Final Four in 2019. Texas is a team good enough to win the national championship this year. He is really, really, really good. And so I do believe somebody is going to give him a chance. Now, I think the two interesting questions, if you want to put aside what was in the police report, what he is accused of doing, and the basketball perspective of it, I think what's interesting is two things. One, does he get a coaching job this coaching cycle? And two, does he have to go to the low major route as opposed to the high major route to begin with? In other words, Hugh Freeze ended up at Liberty after his situation. Bobby Petrino started at Western Kentucky after his situation. And so again, I'm not dismissing what happened. I'm not even saying that I would hire him if I was in charge. But we have to accept the reality that he is going to be hired at some point. And I think from that perspective, those are the interesting questions. Does he start at a low major and build himself back up? Or does he go straight to the high major level? And how soon does it happen? Now, how soon does it happen? I don't know if it'll be this year. I don't know if any AD will have the interest in doing it. But even if an AD has the interest in doing it, again, I don't know if he'll get a sign-off from a school president, from a board of trustees, from his big donors or her big donors, obviously, whoever. So there's that element of it. I don't know if it's going to be this year. And I would add this year, the jobs that are going to potentially open probably don't make that much sense for Chris Beard, right? Like Georgetown's going to open. I don't see Chris Beard at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Georgia Tech's probably almost certainly going to open. I don't see Chris Beard at an engineering school in Atlanta. Berkeley is going to open. Don't see that one for Chris Beard. University of Washington is probably going to open. Don't see that one for Chris Beard. So I don't know if it's going to be this year. I just think it's probably too soon. And I don't think the jobs that are going to open have any interest in getting in the Chris Beard business. I will say this, though. You start to look at what jobs could potentially be open at this time next year or February, March of 2024. That's a different deal altogether. Think about some of the jobs that could open up next year. Kenny Payne, and Nick Coffey talked about this on the show last week. Now, he didn't talk about Chris Beard. I don't want to put words in Nick Coffey's mouth. But Nick Coffey covers Louisville on a day-to-day basis. And if Kenny Payne doesn't significantly improve next year, they are literally, Nick laid it out, the worst Power 5, Power 6 team in the history of the Ken Pomeroy era. So we're talking 20 plus years. They're the worst Power 5 team, Power 6 team. If Kenny Payne doesn't improve significantly in the next year, I think he's probably getting fired next year. 2 and done. They'll give him till this offseason, but if he doesn't hit the portal hard and he doesn't flip this roster quick and he doesn't show major signs of improvement, I don't think he's back next year. Can I see Louisville hiring Kenny Payne? Now, I know they have a checkered past. I know Tom Jurich was the guy that hired Bobby Petrino and Rick Pitino and stood by Rick Pitino with the first incident and rehired Bobby Petrino. So I don't know if the new AD would, but is it inconceivable after whiffing on Chris Mack and whiffing on Kenny Payne? I could see it happening. Give you another one. LSU. The fans are already growing restless with Matt McMahon. We've had Matt McMahon on the show. I like Matt McMahon. Seems like a good guy. I don't know him well, but it's not working. They're in last place in the SEC right now. Behind Ole Miss, behind Georgia, behind whoever. Pick your worst team. Vanderbilt. LSU is worse. And LSU, remember, you can criticize Will Wade for whatever you want. They made a bunch of NCAA tournaments under Will Wade. They made an NCAA tournament last year with an interim head coach after Will Wade had been fired. LSU, Scott Woodward, I could see him potentially biting the bullet and saying, this is the best coach I'm ever going to get. I got to take a chance because we're in a loaded SEC that, of course, is adding Texas and Oklahoma. I'll give you one more. What about Texas Tech? You understand that Texas Tech right now. Now, they made the Sweet 16 last year in the first year post Chris Beard. But beyond that, this season they're terrible. Now, they've had injuries. Mark Adams, I don't personally have an issue with Mark Adams, but they're tied for last place as I record here in the Big 12. They finish in last place this year. They finish in last place next year. they're going to be looking for a head coach. And I don't think it gets any easier next year when now you add Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati to the mix. Now, Central Florida, I don't know if Central Florida is going to put up much of a fight, but the Big 12 is going to be tough again next year, going to be the best conference in college basketball next year. You mean to tell me if he finishes in 9th or 10th or 11th place in the Big 12 next year that Mark Adams is going to survive? Now, people say, oh, they'll never rehire Chris Beard. Really? Texas Tech wants to be good. He brought them to a level that the program has never been. So could I see Texas Tech hiring Chris Beard? I absolutely could. And so again, we have to separate what should happen with what very likely will happen. And listen, we all, to some degree, whether you're a female yourself, and I know we have a lot of female listeners, I'm not trying to diminish your opinion, but we all have mothers, sisters, daughters, granddaughters. There's a difference between what should happen and what will happen. And I'm just saying, now that the charges are dropped, I do think Chris Beard is going to be a college basketball head coach probably pretty soon.